Hey everybody, short one for you today. So I've been reading your letters, which I've been enjoying very much. A lot of talk about pets. Besides pets, I've noticed a lot of people have been mentioning how difficult it is to read Shakespeare because of his English, his style, the way that he wrote. And indeed, it is very hard. Sometimes it seems to take almost a whole semester to really get into reading Shakespeare, and then the semester's over. It takes even longer, maybe years, to sort of begin to get underneath Shakespeare's language. So I've noticed a lot of people, though, have been saying that they're finding it difficult to read his Old English, capital letters, Old English. So when I see that kind of language, it means that you guys are ready for the talk, which has, yeah, the talk, which is what this video is going to be all about. To talk about what it means to say Old English. What does Old English mean? What is Shakespeare writing in? What do we call his English? And what do some other terms mean for other kinds of English? So the first one, spoiler alert, Shakespeare does not write in Old English. So Old English is something else. And we're going to look at what these terms mean, or the most important terms for different kinds of English. In this little video presentation here, Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. We're going to look at actually, we're going to talk about a text I almost assigned for this course. I've taught this in this course before. It's like one of the most influential books in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, late classical period. It's by a guy you probably never heard of. His name's Boethius. Onkelos Severinus Boethius, I think his full name is. He's kind of a late Roman. He was a senator and sort of an advisor under Theodoric, which was one of the Gothic emperors of Rome, one of the Gothic kings when they had sort of conquered the Italian peninsula. And he ran afoul of the emperor and was imprisoned and sentenced to execution. And while he was waiting for kind of a long time in what seems like some sort of nasty castle for his execution, he had a lot of time on his hands, and he wrote this book called The Consolation of Philosophy, where philosophy, like a lady named Philosophy, actually comes into his cell and tries to convince him that it's fine, which is about all that philosophy could offer him at that point, is just sort of consolation, right, to the fact that life screwed him over and he's going to die, but that's okay. Anywho, it's very interesting work. And there's a poem that begins this work. It's from about behind my image here tells you that it's from about 580 BC. So this is after, 80. So this is about 100 years after St. Augustine's soliloquies, and I think it very much draws on it. Anyway, so one of the first lines of this prose part after this poem. Oh, and by the way, I have my daughter in here. There's Poppy. She's joining us today because of COVID. Anywho. So there's this poem that begins this, and it's like he's moping and he's sad and he's crying and all this stuff. And then Lady Philosophy comes in, and there's this prose part. So the work goes back and forth. Okay, so the thing about this text, I said it was very popular. Its popularity shows in the fact that it was translated over and over again into English. So we're going to look at 3 different translations over the course of the history of English of the beginning, the prose part of this work. So in Latin, haec tu mecum tacitus ipse reputarem, Queremoniamque lacrimabilem stile officio signarem, aestitisi mihi supra verticem visa est mulier. Forget that, Latin. That's what that means, basically. While I was thinking these thoughts to myself in silence, and set my pen to record this tearful complaint, there seemed to stand above my head a woman. A scene very redolent of Augustine's soliloquies. All right, so that was the Latin, and this is a modern English translation of that Latin just for reference, okay? So now we're going to look at some of the early English translations of this work, and we're going to go through them exemplifying these different periods in English. So, as I said, Old English is not what Shakespeare wrote. Let's look at Old English. So King Alfred, a powerful, oops, I forgot to close parentheses. Anyway, King Alfred was a powerful Anglo-Saxon king, and he translated this work in about 880 AD. Into his language, which is, he called it West Saxon, but we call it Old English. Let's take a look. That's Old English. So when you use Old English in capital letters, that's really what you should properly be referring to. Something like this. So there's lots of different manuscripts and texts that remain to us from Old English, lots of different dialects, but this is the one that was used to translate this passage. And he was very liberal with the way he said it. But here, I'm going to read it more or less how we think it sounds. Faich fa this lawth quath boetius. Jomrienda sungen havde. Da kom der gan into me helvan kun wisdom. And that mean murden and mod mit his wurm gegrete. Okay, I mean, I could say all kinds of things. You could take my Old English course if I ever offer it again here, or my History of the English Language course. But you might notice that this is not even recognizable or intelligible to a modern English speaker. This is, in essence, a different language. And that's what Old English was. It did not work like modern English worked. Everything changed over the centuries, including the kind of words that we had most and the way that the grammar worked. That's Old English. And yet, by the way, despite this, the change of Old English is continuous. There was no major breaks or something. Hey, Poppy, could you stop making those foot noises? She's crawling into my bookshelf. There she goes. Snail-like. Anywho, let's move on a little bit, though. So that's Old English. Well, let's take a look at Middle English. And so we happen to have a translation by none other than Geoffrey Chaucer of this entire work, which he wrote in around 1381. So we've moved forward 500 years. Is that right? Yes. About 500 years from King Alfred. Let's take a look at his version of this line. That's Middle English. In the manner, while that he still recorded of these things with myself, and merked my weekly complaint with office of Pointel, I saw standing above in the height of Minhevid, a woman. All right, so we're not yet at modern English, but you might just scan these lines, and I don't know if how I pronounced it sounded anything less like, alien speak than the Old English, but you might just look at this and say, this is more recognizable to me. Now then, let's jump forward a few more hundred years to the time of Shakespeare. Shakespeare didn't translate this, but guess who did? Queen Elizabeth I in 1593. So we call this early modern English, but the early is just sort of a tack on. This is modern English. So Shakespeare's English, London Elizabethan era English, was modern English for many linguistic reasons I won't get into, but let's look at Elizabeth's translation in something like her own spelling, as much as I think the text that I found this in preserved it. And I'm going to try to pronounce this as it probably sounded to the best of our ability. English was right in the middle of something called the Great Vowel Shift, which was changing everything. But the grammar and essentially the way that it's pronounced is modern. Will have all this alone in silence. I bethought me, and tearsful complied, and styleless office meant, o'er my head to stand woman did appear. I seem to have sprouted little wings. Anyway, probably didn't do too great of a job at that. Actually, pronouncing Renaissance English, A, isn't my forte, it's my specialty, and B is a dispute-laden field. But at any rate, let's survey, and I hope my picture doesn't come in these. If I try to move that picture, yeah, it's going to cover a little bit. But let's just survey these three different sort of layers and a little dig we're doing of English here real quick. So Shakespeare is markedly in this layer of English, which is our layer. English has not changed enough. Has not changed enough in the intervening 400 some years since Shakespeare's time to earn a new title. No matter how much it sounds different, no matter how many different sort of geopolitical events have sort of erupted in the meantime, linguistically speaking, English has not changed enough to qualify as like a new phase. When we get into different kinds of English, like African American English, for instance, all bets are off. There's no one's quite know how to categorize English, but we're talking about sort of the myth of standard English for a minute. We're still in modern English. Old English, very Germanic, very different. There's even different letters here. Middle English, It's representing about 500 changes, which are oddly don't have as much to do with the Norman, the French invasion, as you might have been taught. And then coming to this. So just so we're clear, Shakespeare does not write in Old English. He didn't speak it, not capital O Old English, yeah? He speaks in modern English. So I'll give you some time to chew on that and cogitate it. I'll probably come back with another video about Hamlet's Acts 3 through 5. In the meantime, you all have a good rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Say bye, Poppy.